Hey everyone, in this video we'll see how to create forms in React like a boss using Houseform. To get started, let me show you around the project. It is a simple Vite starter application where I have Vite config file which also has TypeScript, and the styling is done basically with Tailwind CSS. Let me show you the HTML file. So this is what we have, a very simple bare bones HTML with a simple form that we have. And let me show you what else. Here we have a very standard main.tsx, and then let's go to app.tsx, and here we have some code. Let me actually run the project and show you how it looks like. Before that, let me actually enable the right example that we'll be using. To execute the project, I'll open up my terminal, and here I will run pnpm run silent dev. That should open up the Vite dev server. I'll control click this, and you can see how it opens up the form. Now this is the form that we'll be using. It is a login form where you have basically two fields. You have the username and the password. Now coming back to VS Code, in the components we have a simple button component, a very simple regular button component that we will use in most React apps. Nothing really different here. And we also have the text box as a separate component, and that is pretty much it. Now when it comes to the form, we basically have the form and a header, and we have three different example implementations of the form here. I'll go through each implementation, and finally we'll get to using Houseform. The reason why I want to show you all three examples is because then you would understand why you should be using something like Houseform instead of building forms by yourself, which I was doing for quite some time when I'm working with React projects, which I completely have stopped because there is no point in building forms without something like Houseforms. And I see a lot of newbie developers also doing the mistakes that I'll be talking towards this video right now. If you are not interested in this and you just want to look at the Houseform implementation, you can simply fast forward this video and go to the exact implementation. To get started, let's first look at some of the wrong approaches or wrong ways of building forms in React. So here I'll open up a form that we have. Let me actually hide the sidebar, and you can see this is a form example with hooks. But the funny thing here is that you return a div and there is no form here. Like if I open up the source code, going back to the React app, and I inspect this, let me open up the inspector, and you can see there is a div called app where we are mounting our React application. Inside this we have one more div. This is a form. This is not an actual div. This mistake is done again by a lot of beginners. They don't use the HTML form. Because of this, they lose accessibility and a lot of features that HTML forms offer by default. Now going forward, this div has basically two other divs. This is the header and this is the actual form that we have. And here I'll go back to React code again to show you further. And here you can see this is the div that we just expanded. And here you have basically two text boxes. One is username and the other is the password. We'll have the same fields for all the three examples that we are going to show or see today. So here basically what happens is that you have two use states. Basically you create a use state for each single field that you're using, and you use a controlled component wherein the value is taken in from the use state, and when the value wants to be changed, you attach the set state method back to the event that fires the change, right? This is the general approach that a lot of people take. And here if I show you, there is also the submit button, and the submit button, instead of being an actual submit button, it's a regular button but has an on click method. Here the downsides of using this kind of a method where you are not actually using a form is pretty significant, and this is not correct. Like I said, number one, accessibility is basically out of the window now. Number two, there is no validation by default anywhere in this entire thing. Like you will have to check if both the values exist, and let's say it's a login form, so maybe you would want to check if the username is 6 characters long. This is an example validation that you would want to do in a form. Form can be like a newsletter form or anything basically as complex as you want. Let's say you want to check if the username is 6 character long. Let's say you want to see if the username does not contain any numbers, and then you would want to check if the password is 8 characters or longer. And after that, you would want to use something like Axios or Fetch API to forward the details to a API. Like I said, there is no validation given by the application itself, and accessibility is not there. Let me quickly show you what I mean. If I go to the console, clear my console, you can see both values are empty, where in fact the form actually requires both the values. And if I click login, the form gets submitted, or technically the submit code gets executed even when both the values are empty. This is fine. Like, you may have a point where you would manually implement the logic to check if both values exist. But like I said, when HTML already gives those logic, as a developer, it is always better that you rely on HTML logic rather than use it on your own and rewrite it. Let's look at the second example where you have form, but then you're still using useState. So here again, in this example, it's the same exact thing. So if I save app.tsx, just to show you, actually I'll just comment this out as well and show you that the form has now vanished here. I'll just clear out my console. So the form has vanished. I'll go back, enable this, and if I go back to Chrome, the form has basically reappeared. I'll go back to code and show you the second example. So here you will see we have two useState hooks here, and we have the same login user function, but instead the approach is a little bit different here. Now there is a proper HTML form, and we have a proper onSubmit event for a form, which we are leveraging instead of having this this login user function being hooked to a button. And within the form, we are again not using, we are not fully using the functionalities of HTML form, which is offered by default in every single browser, where you're loading the value, and basically you have a controlled element. Basically you load the value here, and then you set the value on change, and they both use the useState hook. Same thing happens for password, and then you have a button. But instead, the big change here is that this is no longer a regular button. This is a button of type submit. Now the one big benefit here, this is where you will see the one big benefit that we have is that you can see there is a required attribute added in both the text fields. So if I now open up the form and I simply click on login, you see the browser's native validation triggers in, and it says, hey, fill the field first because it's required. So with this, you don't have to write this kind of a logic when you're using forms. So it's partially there. Forms can offer much more. Like, you can see how this is using the forms built-in HTML forms built-in requirement logic, and you can see both username and password are required, and only then. So now we don't have to check for empty values in this case. Let's move forward and let me show you the thing. Now here you can see I am no longer checking. I mean, I've made comments to not spend too much time on creating the boilerplate project, but you can see now we are no longer checking if the values are empty. We're just checking for other application specific or business logic specific criteria instead of basic core fundamental implementation of the form. Now that we have seen how not to do forms in React, let's look at Houseform, which makes building React forms a breeze. You can build React forms with this like a boss. Now there are so many other libraries that claim to do the same thing. Like, for example, you have React hook form, and there are many other libraries that you can go to npm.js and see. Why specifically Houseform? The first point is that you have first class React Native support with this, and then it is much more smaller as a bundle than React hook form, which is a little bit on the heavier side. Then Houseform uses controlled components, which means you will never end up having weird errors that you would see with something like React hook forms. And the most favorite thing that I like about Houseform is that it is headless, meaning that you can use as much custom components as you want, customize them to as much of an extent as you would wish, and you can still use it in Houseform. So it's not basically form first approach. Another library that we'll be using along with Houseform is Zod. Zod is absolutely amazing. I was using Joy previously, but now I've shifted to Zod. The best thing with Zod is that it's TypeScript first. So if you're building an application, a serious application with TypeScript and React, Zod is like the perfect choice. But to get started, let's first install Houseform and Zod into our project. For that, I'll just open up my terminal, cut the process that is currently running, which is Vite dev server, and here I'll run the command pnpm add. Let's add Houseform and Zod. Let's wait for a couple of seconds for this to finish. pnpm is super fast. Again, something cool that I really like and use every day. Now let's go back to VS Code and confirm if Zod and Houseform have been installed. Let me see, where is that? Yeah, you can see Zod and you can also see Houseform in the dependencies. So let's get to the implementation part of it. So for that, I've already created a sample file here, which is basically an empty component, completely empty component. I'll basically restart the dev server again, and we should see once the dev server is started. Let me quickly close these two, we no longer need them. Once you see the dev server has started and I will save app.js, you will see the form basically go away. So we can basically build the form now. Let's go to the file that we are working on. We are working on a Houseform.js where I've got a component called using form with Houseform. Now what this will do is it will actually return a form which is not a HTML native form, but it's actually a Houseform form. So let me first import from Houseform. I'll import something called form, and here I will do return. Oh wait, we already have return, so I'll return a form now, and let me do that. And here this will take a function that will actually return an HTML form. So you're basically building on top of the HTML form additional logic built by Houseform. And in this form, now let's first save this file and see if we have gotten any errors. As I can see, there is no errors as of yet. Let's go back to one of the previous examples that we were using here and then basically copy some of the things that we were using anyways. For example, I had this style here without the onSubmit because we don't want that. We will attach the onSubmit to Houseform instead of the native form, and here we will have a couple of things. So I will get submit function from here and hook this up to the native form. So this is like hooking up Houseform with HTML form. So here I'll do onSubmit as a function, and here I will do submit. Right, as simple as that. And you know, we might want to add some additional logic that will prevent us from submitting invalid forms. So I'll probably grab this function called isValid, and here I'll call it this way, isValid as a function, and submit. So if it is valid, then you submit. Wait, I think it's a boolean, so we don't need to call this. So let's do it this way. This looks good to me in terms of hooking up the form, in terms of hooking up Houseform to HTML form. So I think we are good with that. Let's copy the fields that we have here, but instead of using our custom fields as is, we will actually import field from Houseform like so, and let's create our first field like so. And this again takes another function. So let me make that function, and this would take our custom component. So here I'll add a text box. I simply have to this is again, like I said, it's controlled component. So here I want a value and I want set value. It's basically like set state, but the hook for setting the value is actually provided by Houseform. So here I'll do value as value, and on change e is given to us. So I'll do set value e.target.value. So that should basically make it a controlled text field. Now one more thing that we want is I think we want placeholder label and required, because we will be using, like I said, some built-in functionality of HTML forms and add more functionality on Houseform. So we'll just basically copy paste the other ones here. Now the reason why we have a squiggly underline here is because you would want to name every single field, and that's how Houseform knows which field we are working with. So I'll add a name here. I'll also call it username. And so once that is done, we have the field basically ready. Let me just do the same thing with password. So I'll create quickly a field with the name password, and in this I'll open up a function that returns another text box, and here I will do required. Wait, that's not what I wanted. Required, and then let's do label as password. Let's set type as password. There you go. And then you have placeholder. I'll put like some random password here. Let's use something like that. Maybe add a character there. Yeah, some sort of a random password that we have. And then let's connect this custom component into the field of Houseform. For that, I'll destructure value and set value. There you go. For value, we would want to attach this here. For set value on change, let's take the event and then do set value e.target.value. Once that is basically done, let me go look if we should have something else. Yeah, we want required. Do we have required? Yep, we have label, placeholder, type, and value. Label, placeholder, type, and value. Everything looks good to me. The next thing that we have is a div here. Simply, this is for aligning the button and having a simple forgot password link. For now, I'll just copy the entire thing and paste it because I think it will work as is. We don't need to really do anything else except import the button and the icon. So let me actually do that. Yep, we want the button, and for icon, we don't have that icon IntelliSense import, so I'll just import manually from Lucid React. We brought that icon, and by the way, Lucid React is a really cool icon library. Do check it out. I'll put the link of all three things, basically Zod, Lucid React, and Houseform, in the description. Do check it out. And here I will import what was the icon? I think it was door open. Yeah, so door open icon, and we should be good to go like this. Now we have the Houseform configured along with HTML form. So once we save again this, we go back, we have basically got our form back, but we haven't added anything on the onSubmit. So even if I type something and click, you can see the form basically reloads and we don't have really anything. One thing that we have to do to fix the reloading behavior is, in our example, we did e.prevent default. We have to do the same thing. So I will basically copy this, copy the type here that I already have instead of retyping that. And here on submit, I will take E from there. Let me import form event from React. And here I will also do e.prevent default to prevent the reload functionality. After that is done, we don't have any logic in the submit thing. So let me actually create that particular login user function. So I'll use an arrow function for this. So login user, and this takes in the data. For now, I'm going to give it the type of any, and this is an arrow function. I'll simply console log the data that we are getting. And here I'll just take the login user function, and instead of hooking that login user function or calling that login user function in the form, we'll actually call it in the Houseform form instance. So let's do on submit. I'll simply say login user. So now if we go back, I'll put some username. If I just submit empty like that, you can see we are still leveraging the functionality of plain HTML form. So I'll put some username here, maybe this one, and maybe a password. And if I click login, you can see that we are getting username and the password that I've entered. So we have now successfully configured Houseform into this React application. Let's now look at Zod and how to use Zod to add validation to this particular form and make it validate as we are typing it. Now to get started, I'll create an object here called const validations as an object, and here I will create two keys. The first key is going to be username. Let's give it a string for now, and then the second validation that I'll have is password. So like that. And here with the username, let's go look at the criteria that we have for business logic. If it is 6 character long, so let me see. So I'm going to import Zod here, and for that I will do Zod, and I will destructure import. You can look at its documentation to see how to use that. Now here I will do z.string. So we want a string, and we want this to be a minimum of 6 characters long. And what else do we have? Yes, a minimum of 6 characters long, and it should not contain any numbers. Now I don't know how to do this in Zod, so let me just quickly give a pause and check how to do that in Zod. I'll come back in a fraction of a second. Alright, so I have done some googling, went on to Zod's GitHub and found this really beautiful regex that we can use to achieve this thing. So let me quickly explain what I did here. So for username, we wanted a string that is no short than 6 characters. So here I say z.string, minimum is .min, and I'm saying minimum of 6 characters. When it does not meet the criteria, throw the following string as an error, or basically return the following string as a Zod error. Now in the next criteria, I'm saying it has to match the following regex, and the regex only matches letters, and that too in case insensitive format. And if the regex does not match, we basically say only letters and nothing else as the error. Now for password, I will again do z.string. And let me go look at the criteria again. For password, it has to be 8 characters long, and that's pretty much the only thing that we want. So I will do .min 8, and when it does not match the criteria, the error message should be minimum 8 characters. Let's call characters this time, because you can have special characters in a password. Okay, that is pretty much it. So now that we have prepared Zod validations for both the required fields, username and password, let's use these validations to tell Houseform on whether to allow submission of the form or not. For this, I will go to the first field in the username, onChange validate, and here I will give validations dot username as the key. So that on change, whenever the user types on a field, or whenever the value of the field basically changes, Houseform will run the following Zod validation, and the validation is of this particular thing. Right now, we will have to somehow show the error. If there is an error, we will somehow have to show that in the UI. My text box component that I've custom created takes another prop called error, and that prop is shown as a span right below the text field. I'll show you how it looks visually once I finish implementing this. But so here along with value and set value, you would also want errors here, and I'll basically say error, and here it has to be a string. So here I will do errors, and I'll basically take the 0th element if there is. For this, actually, I will do the following. I will say errors, and if there is an error, pick the 0th. Otherwise, just don't do anything. Simply provide an undefined there. Right now, same thing we'll do for for password, on change validate, and here I'll do validations dot password, and to display the error, I'll basically read the errors here, and I'll just copy paste the above line, which should work. So I'll just copy paste that, and that looks good to me. Now that we have errors configured, validation configured in Houseform using Zod, let's go back and try to fill the form. We are basically 90% done with this video. So I just gave it a quick refresh, and if I just hit a couple of lines, you can see immediately that the form starts to show a red error, and the text field starts to react. And even if I go back, it is not going to go. So I have to type something which is above 6 characters. So let me type something. So if I do that, and you can see it says only letters and nothing else. I think we have a problem with the regex here. Let me quickly have a look and fix that. Alright, that was a really stupid mistake. I've realized that we don't really need the regex constructor here, the regex class here, to be initialized, because anyhow we were using the right format. While being tested in the tutorial, I didn't pay attention to that. Now it should work as expected. So if I go back, you can see if I type anything less than 6 characters, it will complain. But as soon as I start typing more than 6 characters, the error basically goes away. Now if I click login, you can see it wants me to fill a password. Again, if I fill any password that is less than 8 characters, you can see how it is again complaining. So we can't really fill the form on this case. Well, we have one more problem. The button has to be disabled, which it is not at the moment. So essentially what I will do is I will have to hook that logic up So here I will do in the button I will do disabled is going to be if not is valid. So if it is invalid, then I want this to be disabled. And I know that I have not added any styles when the button is disabled, so for that I will basically add some Tailwind classes. Let me actually do on disabled pointer events none, so that clicks won't matter, active focus states won't matter, and when disabled I want this to basically become 50% opacity, right? So if I now you can see that the form is disabled, the button is also disabled, and I can't really click on it. Now as soon as I put more than 8 characters, the form basically enables and you can start to use it. So by the time your business logic actually starts to kick in, validation has been taken care of, accessibility has been taken care of, or at least has been improved. This was a quick tutorial on Houseform and how to use Houseform and create forms on React like a boss. This channel is all about making you better at programming. So if you are new to coding or if you enjoy videos like this, please kindly subscribe. This is a new channel. It will really help us a lot. That being said, thank you so much for watching, and I'm almost recording 30 minutes past midnight, so I guess good night.